Hello, I'm Krista McAllister, and welcome to Cerius Leadership. Whether you are growing your business, growing your career, or quite possibly both, thank you for listening. Today, I'm excited to welcome Leah Barron. Leah, I'm so excited. You are a CFO, you're a private markets investor, and a business strategist, and you really get to see the ins and outs of growing a business from A to Z.
I'm so excited to be with you today, Kristen, and talking about all things value creation, business growth, and what I can share in terms of the investment world from a private equity perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting, Leah. If someone once told me that I should be growing a business from the perspective of an investor of that business. Don't think of myself as the president or the CEO, but as an investor. And it's whether I'm creating value for myself or my family or a future owner who may own it next, to always think like an investor of that business.
Yeah, I coach people the same way. When you're investing in a company, you're looking at several different ways that that company can be scaled over time. And sometimes when a founder approaches their business, they might build it for themselves and build themselves into the business. And so with building a business with the end in mind, or thinking like an investor, you're going to be building that business to be able to scale, to ultimately get a return on that investment, and also to be building it so that it can run without you, so that it can run into perpetuity and have a great legacy in the mix.
I've never heard it said that way, is that as founders, we have to build ourselves into the business because that's all we can only afford us when we're starting it out and to a certain point. And then you hit that tipping point where you need to be out of the business and the business needs to be able to not just operate but grow without you. And that's truly where the value is. What do you see as that point? Is it a certain dollar value? Is it just a life cycle of the business? How do business owners know, okay, now I really need to step and look at it from an investor perspective, not having me in the business on a day to day with it wrapped around me?
Yeah. I would say, a lot of the time I'm looking at small to mid-sized businesses in my investment portfolio. And one thing that you run across is the owner that is so integral to the business. They hold all of the key relationships for sales. They control every decision that comes out of the executive level meeting, and they're not really building themselves out of the job. I would say a big part of getting out of a lifestyle business, right, where the business is merely there to just afford them the lifestyle that they'd like. Beyond that is the scaling and is the quote unquote professionalization. And when I say that, I'm talking about the systems and the processes and the people in place so that that business can scale and grow to an enterprise level, which is a very different set of skills, which you might have heard the term, what got you there won't get you there,
Marshall
right?
Goldsmith.
Exactly. And so that's a big part of looking and assessing these businesses, is the different levers of enterprise value, and working yourself out of the business, meaning that you're working on the business, not in the business, is a big part of being attractive to a private equity investment, and what is going to get you ultimately the most value for your business, and what will, lead you into a healthy retirement, and being able to do more things beyond that business's your involvement in that business.
I love that you brought up in the business versus on the business. Just from your perspective and clarification, what does that in the business look like versus those activities when I'm working on the business?
Yeah, I get asked a lot as a former operator of businesses and a former CFO, and are when you're investing in the businesses, I get asked, if you're investing in it, does that mean you're going to go in and work in the business? The answer is no. My job as an investor is to put together the thesis and the team around this company and and build in the resources so that I'm not working in the business. I'm not going to be doing the accounting. I'm not going to be doing the day-to-day management, right? That's for our management team. So we're putting in, fully baked management teams, CEOs, CFOs, the whole executive level, a senior level of talent in there to be able to scale and grow the business. And we look for very qualified and experienced folks to do that. And we work with them on a quarterly basis and on a board level, where we're putting in industry professionals within the board and great business minds to be able to strategically guide the company for the ultimately the best ROI for our investors. And so it's more about thinking in terms of a strategic level of saying, I have an executive level team in place to be able to run the day-to-day operations, the blocking and tackling of this business, so that I can sit at a 20, 30,000 foot level and say, where's the future going to take this business and direct the company that way.
So many people look at their leadership team as their day-to-day management and operations, and we're starting to see this big push of leaning on the leadership team to help decide how we get there, to also be working with the owner or the investor on the business, not just in the business, because they know it so well. Are you seeing an evolution of leadership teams that are a little more engaged on that strategic, that future looking, especially at the speed of change right now, what's the next generation of our business? Because if we're not evolving, we're dying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a delicate balance, Kristen, because if I have an executive level team that is all highly strategic, and that personality mix is everyone in the room is telling us what we should do or what should be done, but nobody is rolling up their sleeves and getting it done, there's a mismatch, right? And so I feel like the executive level team has to have that balance between and skill set to be able to, especially the CEO, be a strategic visionary, be the one kind of setting the course for the rest of the organization. But at the same time, there's points, especially in lower middle market businesses that are more resource strapped, is that you have to be able to have an executive level team that knows how to roll up their sleeves if that's ever the case, right? And so it's having that set of experience and tools in their toolbox to be able to do that well.
How often do you find when you're investing in a business, you're buying it from either the owner or the founder, and you certainly have a thesis for it, a business thesis, a plan, a vision for it. How often is that vision very different than what the owner had as a vision and what they were driving the company towards? Are you often picking it up and carrying it on with maybe just some different operational finance levers? Or do you have a very different direction for that?
You have hit on one of my very favorite topics, which I love to pontificate on, and it's about kind of the structure of private equity firms, right? In When private equity was first invented, quote unquote, in 1946 was the first documented leveraged buyout, right? So they were playing with the financial engineering of the business to be able to create growth and revenue, return on investment for their investors. With the lean manufacturing movement in the 70s, 80s, it became much more about operational improvements and what levers could be pulled in order to create value. You move into subsequent generations, which we're all focused on tech and process enhancement. And so we pulled those levers. And I think the future of what private equity looks like today is all of those things. Nothing has gone away by any means, but it's also the employee culture and the leadership and the human capital component of what investing looks like. And so you're seeing much more of a focus, and what Marin Investment Partners does, my firm, is focus on that employee culture, because McKinsey has shown, research has shown across the decades, that when you have a strong employee culture, your revenue is 4 times that of your competition, which doesn't have a strong employee culture. So that's it's not only just the switching costs of employees and turnover and the toxicity involved there to your bottom line, but it's also affecting your top line revenues as well. And so all of that together is a huge way to build value into those companies, and a huge focus for us.
We're going to dig into this a little bit more because you just debunked a myth that is rampant. Just about every business owner thinks private equity, they're just going to come in and see how many ways that they can shape this thing, where else they can get the costs out and run it as lean as they possibly can. If I want to preserve my legacy, I want my employees to have, I want their children's children to be able to work here. I'm not going to sell to or even consider private equity. And you're
Right.
saying, no, 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 no. The future of private equity is that the three-legged stool: operations, finance, and human capital, because that's
Yeah.
driving the other two.
Yeah, I would say that the industry is finally hearing that, and my approach has been a little bit different. I have a master's of organizational leadership in addition to the CPA and master's of accountancy, and so that's given me a leg up, I feel like, in comparison with my contemporaries. But it is being highly noticed. You see even large firms such as KKR and Apollo bringing in employee ownership strategies. More thought is given to the employee experience, and I think it's becoming more and more prevalent, but we're still in the early stages of this kind of thought leadership behind that.
To me, from a finance perspective, it seems obvious, though it's very difficult to accomplish and it's very difficult to achieve. It's really like the two most expensive activities that any business can do:
Mhm.
new client acquisition, new employee acquisition. That talent
Yes.
acquisition piece, and I am in the world of talent acquisition, I will say we are
Mhm.
the most expensive thing for a company to do between talent
Yeah.
acquisition and sales, getting new customers. That's, you look at the cost of turnover and what that does, both, you said, at the customer revenue level as well as your operating level. What do you see as kind of some of those biggest levers that when you are coming into a company, they've got a culture and those employees have probably worked there for 10, 20 years. What do you see as your biggest opportunity to then bring it into the future, bring it to the next level, and not just have a home for them, but the next generation's home? Because there's sometimes you get that stagnation when someone's been there for 20 years.
Mhm.
And the
Yeah.
thought is, we
And
just want to bring all new people in, but you're saying, no, 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 no. There's another way to do this.
yes, yeah, absolutely. So I would say a large problem that private equity folks face is, we run at 1,000,000 miles an hour, right? It's business on caffeine mode, right? We're very the people that private equity attracts are high performers, ambitious, motivated, mostly impatient types, and we want to grow those businesses because we have a track record with our investors, and we want to be able to provide great returns for them, and for everyone to win in that scenario. The problem that private equity firms encounter, and I can't speak on behalf of all of them, right? There are 8,000 plus private equity firms out there, and each one is very different. But I would say a common complaint is the leadership team that I have in place isn't the leadership team that I need in order to bring me to the next stage. And that may be skill set, that might be a number of different things. It could just be the culture in general, right? And so I'm not saying that no employee will ever be fired in this new generation of the future of private equity, or that no one would be laid off, right? That would be impractical, because there is, in sometimes family owned or founder owned companies, too much leeway given to employees, right? And there isn't as much of a corralling around the employee, the mission of the company. And so with that, right, you have that challenge of saying, okay, how is it that I supplement and how do I bring in the or formulate the right team? And my postulation, my argument would be, well, what are we doing as private equity investors to better enable our teams to get there? Is it just that we fire them? Right, that's the past, right? We've done that, and incurred all sorts of costs along the way. So really, what things can we do in order to better equip our teams? And one thing that Marin Investment Partners does is equip, say it's a finance leader, right? The finance leader in traditional private equity is subject to lots of questions, most of the blame if something goes wrong,
Yeah.
and they're not given the right tools, right? They're told, okay, run a cash flow analysis here, do this. But if they're like a controller level, employee that has been brought up into the CFO level, they don't always know what metrics the private equity firm is expecting. And so just even the communication of expectations from the beginning of saying, here are the KPIs I'm looking for, here's the dashboard that I want to see, here is the metrics that you're being held to, having that conversation and making sure that that's in the forefront of the transparency around, yes, this is a different type of ownership. No, you shouldn't be scared. Yes, there is a lot of value for you if you come along with a private equity firm and seek to understand. And I think it's really that empathy both ways, that I understand, as a former operator, I get where they're coming from, right? They don't trust this new person coming in telling them what to do, and so there's a trust building component, but there's also very practical tools that I can give to that CFO in that circumstance that will help them level up, right? And it might just be a template. It could be as simple as that, right? Another strategy too is, in terms of the employee culture, is maybe waiting for the private equity firm to wait to announce their acquisition. And it's hard because as a private equity investor, I'm very proud of my acquisition. I'm very excited to tell all of my colleagues about it. But when I delay that and I say, nope, I'm going to let the employees settle into this, right, and not plaster the publicity all over the place, right, then it's starting to say, we're going to do this when you're ready and when the culture's ready for this, and postponing those things just in the tiniest practical ways, because to me the devil's always in the details of how you do this.
Mm-hmm. What I'm hearing, there's a difference in number of ownership teams who haven't necessarily done succession planning. Their succession plan was, I'm going to sell it and it will then be someone else's. Or they were a subject matter expert, not necessarily an organizational development expert or a leadership expert. So as you're coming in, you bring in the clarity of, here are the set of expectations. I'm not sure if you even had expectations prior. I'm not sure if those are changing. I'm not going to wait 2 months from now for me to ask for stuff, you to not be sure what it is. And then we are both frustrated as can be, and it's tough to walk back from there. You're saying, here are the expectations. What do you know how to do? What do you need to be trained on? What are you not sure? And see if they've, I call it, do they have the skills? Do they have the ability to get the skills? And are they willing? Not everyone wants to work
Yep.
for an ownership that has very strong financial goals and has a board, because you're no longer just walking into the owner's office. Hey, we made money this month. This is what's going on. There's a board package and a presentation and certain requirements that you have. And not everyone
Mm-hmm.
wants to do that.
Yep. And that's fair. It is a different pace. And I absolutely understand that. I think it's a little, old fashioned, I guess, to say, no, I don't want to work for private equity, period, because like I said, there's 8,000 different private equity firms and they all have different approaches, right? And so I feel like when there's a meeting of the minds there, the pace is a little different. But when you have those clear expectations, sometimes it's really refreshing because you go from opaqueness and unclear expectations to very clear expectations. And the difference is there a lot of unrealistic pressure being
Mhm.
applied, or is the pressure realistic and good and refines the team and makes it better over time?
I've got a fun one to throw at you, Leah. Let's say
Okay.
I'm on the leadership team. My company, I was just told that you have bought my company. What are some of the questions you'd like to hear me ask?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think the first is, what's the mission? What's changing? Um, who do I contact when I have an issue, right? Who's
Hmm.
who's the final say on things? Um, who's on the board, right? I
Yeah.
want them to start understanding that there's a different governance structure, that there might be a different strategy. Some companies that I see that have strong margins and are great companies to work for and have great cultures, we're not going to be doing very much, in
Hmm.
terms of our initial onboarding of that business. They might even not know that there's a difference in ownership, right? When done well.
Yeah.
But also it's the what can happen in lower middle market family owned businesses, right, is a big kind of ripping off the band-aid, because guess what, change is hard in your personal life, change is hard in your professional life. This happens to be a big change, and with empathy and transparency and respect, we can say, look, I understand that this is a change, and I know that the employees that work for our companies, they spend most of their time at work, uh, versus with their families. And so I want to make it as painless as possible. Does that mean it's going to go perfectly? No. But am I going to bring a whole new world of resources to that company to help them?
Yes.
Yes.
And I think that's a big difference is a lot of them are resource strapped,
Yeah.
knowledge strapped, experience strapped, and you're able to come in and fill in that gap. And there's one of the best things I've heard from a turnaround CEO was his success came from not walking in and making changes and making it into a new company, but from understanding what was the legacy that got it here, what part of that legacy do we need to preserve, and what do we need to evolve to? And getting that clarity, whether it's being financial backed, a turnaround CEO coming in, sometimes we need to evolve if we have not been evolving. And you've talked a lot about you've got a finance background, you've both been an operator and in finance. Curious, what are some of those maybe finance metrics or operational metrics that are key in a small to mid-sized business to be looking at? Because that's the first place you're going. You're
Yes.
saying, let me
Yeah.
look at these metrics. So let's say this is I want to be as pretty and special and valuable to someone else coming in as a financial sponsor or owner. What are some of those first things you're looking at?
Yeah. A former boss within private equity said it the best. And he said, basically, in a board meeting, I have three questions. Is revenue growing? If not, why? Is gross
Mhm.
margin growing? If not, why? And is net income growing? If not, why?
The big three.
Yep, right. And it's very simple and elegant in the way that he put it. It obviously gets to there's a lot there in terms of
Mhm.
unpacking that. But that's the foundation, right? Is do I see a clear path to growth? And I want to know, as an investor, um, if there are impediments to that growth, what is the problem? And let's get a solution in place now, right? And so being able to be decisive is a huge characteristic that I'm looking for in my leadership team, to be able to say, uh, fail fast, fail cheap,
Yep.
and get to a solution, right? And so those are the top three KPIs. Obviously, I'm looking at the whole organization. What's the health of the culture? What's the health of our marketing and sales pipeline? All those are very important, or product innovation pipeline. But at the end of the day, those three things really are the starting point for our conversations.
Everything that you just mentioned that's ancillary to it is in pursuit of one or all three of those. As
Exactly.
you're always going to be pulling one down while you're pushing one up. They're never a straight line in the same place at the same time at the same rate. I love that you've talked about purpose, people, profits. You've got to have that culture moving forward. Their existing culture is important. They've got to have that. And you've talked about bringing additional resources to invest in the business, invest in the employees. We really want them to develop and grow with it. What's advice you'd give to business owners who maybe are struggling in that investing in their employees? Like, well, we got to here. Let's see how much further we can get to. Or maybe not knowing what kind of development or support that's needed, because that's a tough thing where they haven't been developing them. You're then stepping in and expected to be okay with where they're at, not having been invested in prior. That's a
Yeah,
tough catch 22.
yeah, and I would say that employee development is simple but not easy, and it can be the least expensive thing. And how I spell love is Time. And so if I see a leader who is spending time with their employee base, and listening, then I see a strong leader, right? If they're locked up in their office all day, paying attention to other things and not prioritizing their employee base, and I don't see a leader that is saying, how do I serve my employees so that they can serve my clients,
Mm-hmm.
then I get concerned, right? And so that's really the beautiful thing that keeps this all going, is the leadership that it takes. And uh, being a private equity executive, right, or working under private equity can be a very sexy title, right? And it attracts a lot of folks to it. But at the end of the day, if there's not some rolling up your sleeves and servant leadership, and saying, yep, my employees are the important ones here, and I'm sharing that praise, and I'm sharing the blame, right, as well as the praise. That's a really important factor for me as I enter a company.
I hear that the time and the interest in investing in the person in your time. And you also mentioned earlier having those clear expectations, knowing, giving that employee a roadmap of here is what is expected of you. Here's how you're doing on that. I speak a lot with CEOs, and one of the first questions I ask is, who loves doing performance reviews and interviewing? I would tell you, no one has ever raised their hand to that,
Yep.
ever.
Mhm.
They love leading, but that performance review, that mentoring, that setting clear expectations is just not in the favorite things to do when I wake up every morning for most business owners, founders, CEOs. So as you look at expectations, given your background in operations and finance, what should I, as an owner, be expecting of my finance leader and my operational leader? Because those tend to be a little more vague than marketing, sales, sometimes even in HR. What should I be leaning on them for and
That's a
support getting from them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In the company, in terms of a CFO, it's a partner to the CEO, and someone who is going to be a balance for them, like a counterbalance, right? So
Mhm.
you want someone who is very prudent with finance and understands it well. Um, to me, I'm looking for someone who can talk beyond the month end close, right? And what we get a lot is a controller who might, just kind of work on the day-to-day stuff and not really see the forest for the trees. When I can see some business literacy in that finance leader, I know that it's a strong choice. So when they're able to say, okay, yeah, um, this finance metric might be one thing, but like, what am I hearing from marketing? What am I hearing from operations? And starting to cross collaborate and starting to partner. That's a really strong piece, is that the finance function is so very important and needs to be a strategic, partner, but also have that deep understanding of what's going on in the business. Because at the end of the day, what I love about accounting is that it is the language of business. It is how business is being interpreted. And so you're a translator as a finance person. You're there to translate what's going on in the business. So you can't sit in an office by yourself. You have to be knowing what's going on in order to be able to provide more context around the numbers that might be popping out on the spreadsheets.
You're not necessarily saying be the social butterfly, take everyone out to lunch, go out. If that gives you hives, act like a reporter. You are an interviewer for the Financial Times or the New York Times. Go ask them some questions. And you didn't say financial literacy is important. You said business literacy.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
know what's going on in the stories behind the one-dimensional numbers on that spreadsheet.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, how do you tie that with operations? Because those are so intertwined in so many ways, and yet they often operate separately or in a silo.
Right, right. You know, I would say it's getting the folks involved in a room together, right? That executive level team can't just be reporting up to the CEO, right? The CEO's job is to get those people to talk with each other, right? Is a flag bearer of that culture. And so when we have cross collaboration and even cross training, right, with between departments and between uh, just those opportunities to say, look, like, what is going to drive this mission, what is going to drive these results home, is when we're all collaborating together. And that's, it is taking time to build trust with the team, and having a meeting maybe in person or on the phone rather than just an email, right? And creating that culture of communication and transparency, and inviting each other into, you know, their your world, right? If there's a miscommunication, that's to me a really systemic sign that maybe we need to be spending some more time together here.
I'm hearing this collaboration, communication, which should be part of any company's culture. And
Mhm.
you're saying these are some of the most important things to me as an investor. What advice would you give to a business owner to think? We understand the takeaway of think like an investor while still staying true to your mission and core values. Those two are not in conflict in any
Mhm.
way.
Mhm.
What would advice would you give to a small business owner? That key takeaway from our discussion, or key thing to remember, that as they are growing their business, to be of value, regardless of what that value is or who it is of value to, what should be some guiding principles in that?
Yeah, I'll end with a little bit of a story. I recently, this past summer, had some conversations with a business owner. Um, she and her husband had founded and run this great big manufacturing company, and had done very well for themselves. The business owner, the husband, passed away due to some unexpected cancer, and it, really, the health event, sent their world into turmoil. She had multiple opportunities, three opportunities, to sell her business at a very high valuation. For lower middle market, $70 million is a lot of money, right? For a couple. When I, finally got to talking with her about 3 years after that, she was auctioning off the assets of her business for 5 million. So she lost all of that value that could have, changed, their family's generational
Wow.
trajectory, right? And so when I think of that, and I think of the economy, the community, the employees that lost and had to endure change because of those, that indecisiveness or that irrational thinking, right? Of trying to hold on to something for personal reasons, right? You think of like all that value and all that economy that has been lost because of that, right? And we're getting to a point in just the time that we're in 2025 of a lot of folks who have owned businesses for years now are looking at an exit, and they might not have a clear succession plan. And so just to know, like, there is value to be had in your company. It's important in so many ways, and the value has, that a marketable price tag, right? And
Mhm.
you can get a lot of value for all that hard work that you've put into it, and not to let that go, not to sit and wait, and but to be proactive about finding that clear succession plan and putting it on paper and making it clear to your employees, is a really strong way to leave a super solid legacy.
Know where you want to end it. You said at the beginning, start with the end of mine.
Yeah.
My favorite. I don't know how we make decisions on a day-to-day basis without knowing what we're making those decisions towards, because
Mhm.
it almost makes those decisions automatic. And I thank you for sharing. And I love the kind of some of those fears of, but I don't want it strategic isn't interested, or I don't know that I want to partner with the private equity. I think that where the world is going, preserving that legacy is becoming more of the norm than maybe what we have known over the last couple of decades. Preserving that legacy and the people and the culture, that is now part of that three-legged stool for
Yes.
anyone. I think
Yeah,
buying the company and understanding that, and having those open conversations about that. So I
exactly.
I love at least have the conversation
Hmm.
and look at all of the options.
Exactly.
Thank
Exactly.
you, Leah. I appreciate so much joining us and your truly heartfelt insights and that passion that you have for what you're doing beyond being an investor. It's almost like being a shepherd or
Yeah.
a Sherpa in the process of going through this. Because as an owner, there's a lot of emotions as you think about any type of change, any type of ownership, and what happens to what I have built. And it sounds like you are a
Exactly.
wealth of knowledge for that. I'm excited to have you back to see how things evolve this year and into next year, and where that stands. I think we've got some other things we can collaborate on as well. I'm excited.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation, Kristen. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share.
You're welcome. Enjoy, and until next time.